Yes, welcome everyone. Welcome to Brainwash Festival, where we explore the theme of truth and doubt. Welcome to you all in the audience, and of course, welcome to the people watching this live stream at home. My name is Naomi Luís. I am a program maker and presenter at the School of Life, and today I have the honor to interview the world's leading expert on irrational behavior about the fascinating topic of misbelief. And I'm just curious to see, because today we're going to dive into this book. Who has already read it? Can you raise some hands? Well, there are a lot of people we can make enthusiastic about this book then. Well, at least I am. It already gave me a lot of interesting insights, because I've always been interested in how people can look at things from different perspectives. I did my master's in intercultural communication, and also in my work this plays a huge role. But I also have personal experience with family members going down the funnel of misbelief and conspiracy theories. And then it can feel like you live in totally different universes, and it can be very hard to bridge that gap. So that makes me even more excited to dive into this topic today together with you. Because at the end of the interview, we also have some room for questions from the audience. And I also want to kindly ask to stay seated until the end. So now, let me introduce our guest for today. He's a professor of psychology and behavioral economics at Duke University. He's known as the world's leading expert on irrational behavior with millions of fans worldwide. He wrote the bestseller Predictably Irrational, and his new book is called Misbelief. Please welcome Dan Ariely. A warm applause.
Hello to everybody.
Hello, Dan. How are you today?
So let me just say that I woke up in the hills of LA looking forward to this interview, and then I quickly learned that my internet in the Airbnb was not working. So I got into a car and quickly went down to the hotel I'm supposed to check into tomorrow. I'm here. I had 2 hours of stressful driving, but I just made it. I hope the internet connection is going to work out. Anyway, difficult to plan in this day and age.
Well, it seems very steady. We're happy you're here. And I actually want to start with your personal story, because you begin your book with how you became the target of conspiracy theories. Could you please take us through that story?
Yeah, so the short version of this is that COVID was an amazing time to be a social scientist. Because I got lots of questions from lots of companies, organizations, governments, questions about remote work and remote studies and releasing prisoners and domestic violence. And I dropped everything, and I was just working on COVID-related issues. And I felt I was using all my knowledge to help. And this went on for a while. And then sometime in July, so quite a long time into this, I get an email from a woman that I once helped create a presentation. She did some presentation, she asked me for help. I was happy to help her. And she says, Dan, what happened to you? How did you become that person? And I don't know what she's talking about, so I write back and I say, what do you have in mind? And she sends me back a whole list of links that describe what an awful person I am. And the experience, I think the best way to describe it is pulling a curtain and seeing in the mirror something that I couldn't imagine it's me. And in the beginning, I tried to contact those people that were posting things about me. Mm-hmm. Just to give one example, there was one video that said that when I was 18, I was badly burned, true. 70% of my body, true. 3 years in hospital, true. But then the video went on to say that because of that, I started hating healthy people. And this
Wow.
is why I joined Bill Gates and the Illuminati to try and kill as many people as possible. And there were lots of other videos like that. They looked at all kinds of things I've done. I worked with the Gates Foundation. I did some projects on vaccines. They called me the chief architect of the COVID pandemic.
Wow.
Anyway, I spent about a month trying to argue with them. Individually, groups, Telegram, conversations. I even invited some people to come and talk to me face to face, outside in a safe place. And things just got worse. I started getting death threats. I got death threats almost every day for 2 years.
Still.
In fact, even a few weeks ago, I got one. It's lower now, but I still get them. But after a month of continuous failing, I realized that it's something I needed to study. Because, you know, if you have somebody who believes the earth is flat, okay. But when somebody is telling me that they know something about me that is not true, and there's nothing in my power to convince them, it's such a shocking experience. I say, how? Like, what happened to persuasion? What happened to information? You know, I even offered people to look at my calendar. I offered people to look at my tax returns because they thought I had a contract with Pfizer. But nothing, nothing worked. So then I spent about 2 years in the dens of misinformation. And this book is my attempt to describe this world of misbelief. And I use COVID as an example, but it's much more than COVID.
Yes.
As you probably remember, there were these floods in the south of Brazil a few months ago. And people from one political party believed that the people who were coming to help were part of a political ploy. The same thing happened with the hurricane in the mountains in Asheville last month, where people rejected aid from the government for similar reasons. So there's something very, very important happening to the world of information and misinformation.
Yes, and I think that's why this book is so relevant today. You distinguish different elements in your book that play a role in misbelief. And I just want to go through all these elements. Of course, we cannot talk about the whole book because you have so many examples. But just to name the elements, you start with the emotional. Then you have the cognitive elements, the personality traits, and you end with the social elements who actually seal the deal. So let's start with the emotional elements. What role does stress play in being more susceptible to misbelief?
Yeah, so stress is the thing that causes people the desire to look for an alternative explanation. And before we talk about this, I want to make a couple of things clear. I'm not talking about the stress that says, gee, I have so much email to answer, I don't know how I'll manage. We're talking about the stress that says, I don't understand the world. I don't understand why the Houthis are attacking these ships. I don't understand what's happening with the media. I don't understand why I'm not doing well after graduating from college. Our shape of the world is changed. And here are two experiments not connected to misbelief. So imagine a tribe of fishermen, two tribes. One fishes in a lake, one fishes in the ocean. Who has a more predictable life? The one in the lake. Lake is basically the same every day. The ocean changes dramatically. which one of those two develop more superstitions? The one in the ocean. Why? Because superstitions are our way to try and feel that we have control. The world is crazy, lots of randomness. We want to feel control. Another example. Imagine a painting with random black and white dots. And I show you one of those and I say, do you see a pattern, a shape, like an animal or a person? And then I show you another one and another one, another one. But we do this on the way to jumping from a plane with a parachute. And we do it before you take off, and just as you take off, and just before you jump. What happens? As people get closer to jumping, they see more patterns. Why? Imagine that you're an animal in the jungle. And imagine that you think there's a tiger. Your system gets into hyperdrive. And now you see every movement of a leaf as if there's a real tiger. So stress causes pressure on our brain to try and understand the world, and we extrapolate and we create things. And of course, with the internet, we get lots of explanations. And then that's the process. So what happened is this stress, this feeling not in control, gets us to want an answer. We want to feel that we are in control, that we understand what is going on. And that's the thing that pushes us, give us the first push. Now, I want to say one other thing. We're at a period of very high stress. Where's the world going? What's happening? So much fake news. What can we trust? And we're also at a period of low resilience. You know, resilience is usually the antidote to stress. How much stress can we handle? Depending on how much resilience we have. And we sadly have low resilience. We don't spend as much time with friends. Economic inequality decreases our ability and willingness to ask for help, decreases in resilience. We trust our governments less. So we're at a very fragile period where it is very easy to want to take this step and find an alternative explanation to reality.
Yeah, and that's also the explanation for like COVID. In COVID times, we experienced a lot of stress and a lot of people became misbelievers. I also want to ask you a question about the term misbelievers.
Right.
Why do you prefer misbeliever over conspiracy theorist?
Yeah, so first of all, I think that conspiracy is a derogatory term. And I think it's not helpful in any way to be derogatory. But I also think that conspiracy theorists kind of make us feel that there's them and us. And you've read the book, and I hope you felt that you could have been a misbeliever as well. And if you did some of the exercises in the books, you probably asked yourself, how solid are your beliefs as well? So I think we're all susceptible, we're all somewhere in the range, and we need to understand that it's not us versus them. You know, sometimes we say, oh, it's these other people, it's not our problem. But the reality is that we need to understand what it is. So it needs to be less derogatory, and it needs to be more inclusive, because we all have elements of that in our lives.
Yeah, I was confronted with that as well, I have to say. Well, let's move on to the cognitive elements.
I will not ask you. I will not ask you which of the beliefs you found that you
we can get to that.
Are on shaky grounds.
Yeah. You start your section of cognitive elements with the quote by Mark Twain. It ain't what you don't know what gets you into trouble. It is what you know for sure that just ain't so. And the funny part is that we're actually not sure if this quote is from Mark Twain. But it's a very good one.
Yeah.
And what I found really interesting is that the gap between what we know and what we think we know is a very dangerous gap. But could you explain why?
Yeah. So, look, our cognition is the way we process information. And our model is we process information like a computer, accurately. But that's not true. There are lots of things that we don't do well, but if we describe one of them, I would go toward the one you emphasize, which is that our confidence is often mismatched with our knowledge. Mm-hmm. And I demonstrated this with a flush toilet. You know, a flush toilet. I showed people a flush toilet, and I said, do you understand how a flush toilet works? And people said, yes. I said, on a scale from 1 to 7, almost 7. Wonderful. Then I said to people, luckily for you, I have all the pieces of a flush toilet. Perfectly new, never touched. Please assemble the flush toilet. Of course, nobody could assemble it. And then I asked them, so how much do you understand how a flush toilet works? And they said, not at all. And, you know, here's the thing. So we all have lots of discussions about lots of things. We have discussions about politics, about ideology, about Gaza. You know, we have lots of discussion about lots of things. Look at your last 3 years of conversations and discussions. How many of those, in percentages, ended up with your conversation partner says, you know what, you're absolutely right. I never heard such good arguments. I'm convinced. I'm changing my opinion. I'm guessing almost never. And how often have we said something like this to somebody? You know what, you're absolutely right. I never thought about this. Thank you so much for helping me think about this. The reality is that our conversations are very ineffective. It's kind of amazing how we don't recognize how ineffective they are, but they are very ineffective. And why they're ineffective? Because we don't listen. When we talk, and when the other person talks, we don't listen. They haven't finished the first sentence, and we are already thinking about how to attack them, defend our position, and so on. We are often not really trying to get to new understanding. We're not trying to get to new understanding. We're trying to defend our position. Now, the illusion of explanatory depth basically say, don't attack. Say to the person, help me understand. I'm not attacking. Help me understand. So I'll give you an example. Lots of people in the US believe that Donald Trump won the previous election and the elections were stolen from him.
Yes.
So we go to people and we say, help me understand, how are the results even collected? What's the process? And people say, I don't know. And then we tell them, and then we say, and how would the results be stolen? Yeah. How would it work out? And people say, I don't know. Now, do people after this discussion change their opinions and think that Trump certainly lost the election? Of course not. But it creates an openness. Yeah. So if you say that we have our knowledge and we have our confidence, knowledge and confidence, the first thing to do is to reduce confidence. And then people are also more open to talk about their knowledge.
Well, it's funny that you come up with this example, because I just listened to a recent interview with Donald Trump. And then he was asked, well, help me understand. You won the elections, but do you have proof of that? And then he says, well, of course, I have a lot of documents. But we will go over those the next time. I have them at home. And then I think, well, this kind of people always have an answer to your question. And there are still a lot of people still believing he won the election. So what would be your response to that?
So look, if a conversation, somebody says, I have the evidence, but not here, that's a very tough thing to say. But you know, that's Donald Trump. But if you talk to one of his supporters and you say, how would it work out? And they say, well, somebody in the poll would take something, would change something. You say, well, but there are two people in the poll from both parties, and there's an observer. How could it be when nobody is noticing it? And you basically, you don't say you're wrong. You say, let's look at the little details. I'll give you another example. You ask people if they understand how a zipper works. And they say yes. And you say, help me understand how. And then when they get to the details, they realize they don't. Mm-hmm. And the principle is that we think we understand things. And when we are asked to think about the details, we understand how much we don't understand. Mm-hmm. Right? It doesn't come from the other people. It's coming from our inability to explain how things are working.
Yeah.
And that basically is the issue. So it's not, you're not attacked. I'm not threatening you. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying, help me understand how this works. Like, think about something like Brexit. Imagine that we asked people in England before they voted, what would be the impact of Brexit? Like, how would it actually, what will be the differences? Mm-hmm. Help me understand. And, not this, Brexit, of course, is very complex. It can't be a 5-minute conversation. But my guess is most people would say, I don't know, and I haven't thought about it. Right? What are the issues? And it's true for almost everything. Look, society is advancing in amazing speeds. We all have our professions. Mm-hmm. Hopefully we're professional in our professions, but in everything else, we're amateurs.
Yeah.
Everything else, we're amateurs. And we think we understand how cryptocurrency works and how the healthcare system works. And we think we understand how antidepressants work. But when we are asked deeper and deeper questions, our metacognition, our confidence in our knowledge quickly shrinks.
Yeah, so the next time someone is super sure about what they're saying, just ask, well, help me understand. Tell me how it works.
Yeah, I do want to say, I want to say one more thing about this. There's a personality difference called intellectual humility.
Yes, I really like that concept.
It's basically the idea. Thank you. I think it's very important. If I could teach one thing in school, that's what I would teach. Intellectual humility is our willingness to accept that we might be wrong. I think that candidate A is better than B, but I might be wrong. I think that the right way to have a romantic relationship is A, or be a parent is B, but I might be wrong. And to some degree, this is what we try as academics to teach our students. We try to teach our students that not knowing and ambiguity is a tremendous opportunity for finding new things. It's, oh my goodness, we don't know what's going on. How wonderful. Now we have 3 years to try and find out what's going on. Now, when we talked about stress, we said how much people don't like not knowing, not being sure about themselves. And think about how much we like politicians who are sure and leaders who are sure. But the reality is that we need to start elevating that I think X, but I'm not sure as a general approach to life.
Yeah, and how can we practice intellectual humility? You also have some beautiful phrases.
Yeah, I think the intellectual humility part starts with, from time to time, convincing ourselves that things that we think we're sure about, we're not so sure about. But for discussions, one of the phrases I like is, what would it take to change your mind? So imagine, let's take something very difficult, like people's opinions about abortions. People are very polarized, very certain about their decisions. And imagine I asked you, what would it take to change your mind? And my guess is that most people would say nothing. Now, if nothing would change your mind, what does it mean? What does it mean? But we need to do these exercises of saying, what do we have opinions because we're sure about the data? What do we have opinion because it's ideology, like belief in God? There's no evidence that would convince you. And which things we're willing to move on.
Yeah, there's also this technique that you ask, like on a scale from 1 to 10, how sure are you about your belief? And then when people say, well, about 9, then you can ask, like, and what is that 1% that you're not sure yet? And then you can start a conversation.
That's right.
I also found really interesting.
There's a very nice exercise in the book on bicycles.
Yeah, I like that one. Actually, we should have done it here in the Netherlands.
Yeah. Yeah.
But can you elaborate on that?
Well, it's extra. Probably the best place to do it is in Holland.
Yeah.
But it basically gives people a few drawings of bicycles that are wrong, and ask people to identify. And we see so many bicycles. You see more bicycles than anybody else on earth. Maybe China sees more. And it's kind of an interesting exercise because even something so familiar and so common, people still make mistakes. Even people who ride bikes make mistakes. And it's basically about how many things escape our knowledge.
Yes, it's really interesting. I also did this exercise, and I thought, of course, I know how a bicycle works and how it functions, but I also made some mistakes. So it would be really interesting if you are interested. You can look into it after the interview. But that's a good one, that we think we actually know, but we don't know all of it. Another thing I want to talk about is solution aversion. Solution aversion is the idea that if we don't like the solution, we tend to not think the problem is real. Could you explain how that works?
That's right. Yeah. So as we said, in the cognitive part, we don't process information objectively. And solution aversion is part of a set of problems we call the motivated reasoning. Now, when we have a discussion about something, often in the background, there's a proposed solution. And if you and I are discussing something and I agree with your position, I also have to accept your solution. But you could say there are two separate things. I can agree with you and not like the solution. But what happens when the solution proposed is not what I'm willing to accept? Am I going to tell you you're wrong just because I don't accept the solution? You still might be right and I don't like the solution, but would I use all my cognitive capacity to reject your arguments because I don't want to accept the solution? So this was done in many areas, but one of the most interesting one is man-made global warming. And imagine 3 groups of people who don't believe in global warming to start with. One group, you say, how serious is the problem of global warming? Not the problem. Another group, you say, the solution to global warming is more government intervention, more taxes, more regulation, more government intervention. How big is the problem of global warming? Not a problem. The third group, you say, the solution to global warming is less government intervention, more free enterprise, less taxes. How big is the problem of global warming? It's a problem. Now, they don't say it's a problem as much as Democrats, but still there's a big gap. Now, what is the idea? The idea is that when I try to convince somebody about man-made global warming, I say, here's another paper, and here's another paper, and here's another paper. And you look at it and say, haven't you read the paper? So it's not that they haven't read the papers, but they reject the evidence. Mm-hmm. And what they reject the evidence? Because they don't like the solutions. And what we need to understand that these are implied solutions. So we usually think to ourselves, let's first agree on the facts and then go to the solution. But if there's already an implied solution, and the implied solution for global warming is more regulation, more taxes, and so on, people are going to look like they reject global warming, but they actually reject
The
solution. So sometimes we need to think first about the solutions that are on the table, and only then we can agree on the fact. So you could say, you know what, before we talk about whether man-made global warming is real or not, let's agree on what we would do if we agree that it's real. And if we find solutions that we agree on, then we can have that discussion.
But in the case of...
It's because the human mind is so good in motivated...
Yeah, but in the case of global warming, would it even be possible to find solutions that work for everyone?
You don't need solution to everyone. But you see, if you don't agree on the solution, the misunderstanding, the misagreement is going to be misplaced.
Mm-hmm.
So it's such a barrier. It's such a barrier that we're not getting into it. And can you overcome that barrier? No. So, could we find better solutions? I think so. But if we don't, we'll never agree to anything, right? So we need to understand what are the barriers to improvement. And if the barrier to improvement is this motivated reasoning, then we need to bypass it somehow.
Yes. Well, I really want to continue.
I think we can create, by the way, we can, there's a lot to talk about.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, it's sometimes a little bit slow, the connection. But I really want to continue to the personality traits because we have two more elements to talk about. Because certain personality traits also play a role in misbelief. But what I found a striking example was the research on alien abduction. Could you please tell us about that? What are the main insights of that research?
Sorry, you got cut. Which one are we talking?
Alien abduction. It is your favorite misbelief, I read.
Okay. Yes.
Yes, could you please share the main insights?
It is. Yeah. So could you... okay, so what is amazing about people who believe that they were abducted by aliens is that there's some truth to that. There's an element of truth. I'm not crazy, but just hold on. There is an element of truth. And what is the element of truth? When we sleep and we dream, the brain sends information to the body. The brain says, take your sword out, cut the dragon, save the princess, all kinds of things. But we are not moving. How come we're not moving when our brain sends commandments to move? It's because when we dream, the brain also paralyzes the spinal cord. And because of that, there are instructions from the brain, but they cannot be executed because we're basically paralyzed. Now, if you don't mind, ask the audience, has anybody in the audience has ever woken up and their body was still paralyzed for a few seconds? Just ask people to raise their hands if it happened to them.
Almost half of the audience has experienced that.
Yeah. We don't know exactly what percentage of the people have this because it hasn't been researched enough, but it certainly happens. So that's the reality. Now, some people, that happened to them, and they say, I was abducted by alien. They take that starting point. By the way, don't ask the people in the audience how many of them have been abducted by aliens. But the people that have that as a starting point have a very bizarre experience. And some people take that and say, I was abducted by aliens, not a small proportion, but those are the people that feel they're abducted by aliens. They take this experience and they add things around that. They fill the gaps. They say, why was I paralyzed? Somebody must have paralyzed me. Who must it have been? And you wake up from a dream and there's still few things in the dream, and then they start believing that. And I love that example because it has some starting point in reality, some physiology, misinterpretation, expanding the scope, and so on. And a lot of these beliefs have something in reality that is the anchor for that misbelief. So the people who think that they were abducted by aliens are people with good imagination and actually faulty memory. These are people who remember things that were not there.
Yes.
Imagine tomorrow somebody would ask you questions about our conversation. Some people would fill the gaps and remember things that were not there. So if you wake up from a dream and you're still paralyzed, you fill the gaps with memory and you have creativity, you might become an alien abductee.
Well, I just think that example is very striking. You also mentioned narcissism a few times. It's also related to the personality traits that play a role in misbelief. But I actually want to move on to the social elements because I think these are maybe the most important ones. Yes, I think a lot of people have experiences with friends or family that go down the funnel of misbelief. And I think, you actually want to get them back or say, like, it's crazy what you're talking about, but you recommend not to ostracize them and actually staying part of their in-group. But why is ostracizing such a big problem?
Yeah, so as you said, the social part is incredibly important. And it's the part that seals the deal. That, people start going down and you can save them, but if somebody gets into the social part, very hard to save them. And the first thing that happened in the social part is that we reject people. Saying to people things like, you're crazy, is not helpful. There's no world in which you would tell somebody you're crazy and you say, okay, you know what, I'm changing my mind. You're telling somebody that they're crazy or they're wrong, and they're just going to defend themselves more. And they're going to look for people who believe just like they do. They feel rejected by you and they'll go and look for some other people. And the research on ostracism is important and fascinating. And the guy who started this research describes him walking in the park with his dog. And two people play frisbee. And they play frisbee. And the frisbee falls next to his feet. And he picks up the frisbee and he throws to one of them. And to his surprise, they throw the frisbee back to him. And they play for a few minutes. And then they stop throwing the frisbee to him. And he just stands there, look at the frisbee, and he feels terribly rejected.
Yeah.
Now, he didn't know these people. He didn't come to play with them. They owe him nothing, but he felt rejected. So as a good psychologist, he did experiments to figure this out. He set a lab next to a yard and invited somebody to come in. There's somebody come in, and he didn't know that, but there were two other people who were waiting, but the two people who were waiting worked for the experiment. They were research assistants. He opens the door, he said, thanks for coming on time. It will be 10 minutes, I'll call you in 10 minutes. He closed the door, and now one of the research assistants picks up a ball, and they start tossing it between the three of them. for 10 minutes. 10 minutes are over, the door is open, come in, and they measure lots of things. We'll talk in a second what they measure. In the second version of the experiment, it starts the same way. They come, open the door, 10 minutes, close the door. One of the research assistants picks a ball. They toss the ball for 5 minutes, not for 10, for 5 minutes. And then for 5 minutes, they stop throwing it to the participant, and they just throw it between the two research assistants. What will be the difference between somebody who played for 10 minutes versus somebody who played for 5 minutes and was rejected for 5 minutes? And it turns out that almost everything good about humanity is reduced. We're less optimistic, less kind, helpless, donate less money, more suspicious, we lie more. It's incredible.
Wow.
And when I thought about COVID and conspiracy and political polarization with these eyes, I actually realized that I have been ostracizing people unintentionally. But like I used to have a phrase that said, what is the color of the sky in your world? And when I used to say it, I thought it was a little bit of funny, but I think the people I said it to felt very rejected. So the first thing we do is we reject people. And by the way, if we use abortion again, if somebody has the opposite opinions to you on something like abortion, it's very hard not to get them to feel rejected. So that's the first step. But then it gets worse. It gets worse because we reject them and they go and find people that think just like them. And then they want to be more part of the group.
Yeah.
So they become more extreme. And there's another very important element we call shibolet. Shibolet. So what is shibolet? There's a story in the Bible of two tribes that had a difficult war. At the end of the war, they settled on the two sides of the river. But then when they walked around on their side, they wanted to know that people that they meet are from their tribe and not from the other tribe. And shibolet is the name of a plant. It's like a wheat. And it just so happened that these two tribes pronounced the name of that plant slightly differently. One of them said she-bolet, one of them said si-bolet. So imagine I walk around and I see you and I show you the plant and I say, hey you, what's the name of that plant? If you say the name that I use, we're brothers, we're from the same tribe, everything is fine. If you say the name that the other tribe is saying, now I know you're not from my family and I need to chase you away or try to hurt you. Now we use now this term shibolet as a term to symbol a discussion that is not about the fact, but it's about identity. Because when I show you the plant, do I care about the name of the plant? No. What do I care about? Your identity. So now think about the discussions of many of our politicians. How many of those discussions are shibolet? They have nothing to do with the facts. I'll give you one example. I don't know if you saw this issue with that Donald Trump said that immigrants are eating
Eating the cats and the dogs. I think everyone saw that, yeah.
You know, people on the Democratic side said he's lying, he's crazy. People on the Republican side said he's signaling his identity. He's anti-immigration. And in fact, he's saying if you want to signal how anti-immigration you are, you have to be extreme.
Yes.
Right? They say only somebody who's truly committed to anti-immigration policies is going to say something so extreme. So, by the way, I'm giving examples from Trump, but both sides do the same thing.
Yes.
Right? You know, so a lot of the discussion is now shibolet. And by the way, I don't know how it is in the Netherlands, but if you look at the fragmentation in the news,
Yeah, just to
it used
interrupt
to be
you.
one national TV show.
Just to interrupt you, because you're sharing a lot of interesting examples, but we only have 5 minutes left. And I also want to go to the questions from the audience. So just to summarize, it's very important to keep people close that are tending to be misbelievers and to listen to them and not dismiss them. And now I just want to go to the questions of the audience because before we round up. So are there any questions? Here.
Yeah. Hi. Hello, could you hear me? Yeah, okay. So you mentioned the guy who is living in the times of COVID, lots of stress about understanding what's happening in this world, struggles, and he starts believing you're a demonic person who is with Illuminati. From psychological perspective, could you tell us how is this different than the guy who lived thousands of years ago and not understanding a lot of things about the world, and he starts believing into a God who watches him all the time up above the clouds? How is that different phenomenally, psychologically, from your perspective?
Very, very, very important question. So first of all, a belief in God is a belief in a good entity. Yes, sometimes there's some devil, but mostly God is a good entity. Mostly God wants good things to happen to you. And you could think about God as part of resilience. Think about somebody like me. I was badly burned. Tough, a long period. If I believed in God, and I say there's a good purpose for this, I might not understand it, but there's a good entity out there that is protecting me and everything is for a good purpose, it would have been easier to deal with. So God is a general belief, and it's a belief in goodness. Conspiracies come out of stress, and it's trying to explain something very specific that is happening. Now, because it's a coming out of stress, the explanation has to be something bad. You can't say, these bad things are happening to me, there must be a benevolent God. So you're looking for a bad thing rather than a good thing. Now, I personally don't believe that there's a God, but for quality of life, if people ask me what to believe, in a God or conspiracies, I would say, go for God. I had one of the things I learned is that being a misbeliever is very tough. I gave ChatGPT my book, and I asked ChatGPT to put one word description of the book, and the one word was the ChatGPT picked was empathy. And I think it's a very nice word because, at the end of the day, I realized that if somebody wakes up as a misbeliever, it's very, very tough. Yeah. They think that Bill Gates is after them and the Illuminati is after them, and there's all these terrible forces that are going behind the scene and trying to negatively impact their behavior. So believing in goodness, I think, is very healthy. If you can do it to well-being. Believing in misbeliefs are terrible, and as you go down the funnel, it becomes worse and worse. And the last thing I will say about your question is that I think that as religiosity is going down, misbelief is going up as well. Because if people are truly religious, and of course there's some people who are both, but if people who are truly religious, that helps them to some degree to cushion some of the hardships of life.
Yes, thank you very much for your answer, and thank you for your question. I think there is no time left for another question. I'm sorry about that. But I just want to thank you so much for sharing your insights. And I would really recommend to read this book if you're curious for more. Thank you all for participating, and also people at home, thanks for participating. I wish you would enjoy the rest of the festival. Thank you very much.